Hey everybody, welcome back, and had a little bit more content from the Content Minds for you from here on YouTube. Really was excited to see the engagement on the last video. A lot of great comments and questions for the kind of the second video in a row there. That was pretty rad, and really enjoyed interacting with almost all of you. We've had an eventful few days since then, the DNC kicking off and concluding, and there's a lot of material from that to draw from. I thought I had noticed one of my previous shorts. It's been a while since I revisited anything related to sort of international relations and AI, so I thought I'd circle back to that, especially in light of one of my previous videos, kind of picking back up, I guess, in the YouTube Shorts recommendation engine, for whatever reason, deciding to sprinkle some of its fairy dust on that video, and then Kamala Harris during her acceptance speech at the DNC mentioning that she was committed to having the United States lead on AI, and I think her words were having America, not China, win the competition for the 21st century, in reference to artificial intelligence. I thought that was really interesting that made it into that speech. Obviously, it will be a historical speech and is one of those big deal speeches. So I thought I'd touch on that for a minute and sort of compare and contrast U.S. AI, the regulatory vision, the policy vision, and how it compares to or doesn't compare to that similar vision in the People's Republic of China. I think we just live in a time of deep skepticism about liberal values, about pluralistic societies, right? It's very easy to sit in an open society and be critical of that society. And I think we are at a moment sort of geostrategically where there's a couple of challenging kind of regimes or ideologies that are presenting themselves to sort of what we would consider to be the basis for liberal democracy in some parts of Asia, obviously in the United States, and in Europe. The most pressing challenge, political economic challenge to that way of life, to that sort of system of organizing societies, most people would agree is the Chinese system, the sort of very technology-driven, communitarian, really Leninist party structure, kind of coupled to a very moderated, kind of open economy, very much determined and guided by top-down industrial policy. I could talk about what defines the Chinese political economy and political system for a long time. Needless to say, it's kind of its own thing, right? It borrows a lot in terms of industrial policy from their East Asian tigers. It borrows obviously a lot of the trappings of its political ideology from Maoism, and before that Marxism, Leninism. Obviously those who watch China closely would assert that there's not actually a lot of Marxism or communism kind of going on in the actual political economy of the country, but it does very much have a lot of relevance to the way the political ideological system works within the People's Republic of China. That is to say that the party system, kind of the party superseding the state and the party being run by one person ultimately, and sort of a very tightly controlled Leninist party structure certainly does apply there quite well. And so really that's these sort of definitions are important when you think about AI, because these are just sort of the underlying sociocultural, sociopolitical norms and patterns and realities that are going to, that have guided and are going to continue to guide artificial intelligence, machine learning developments in different polities around the world, in places where you have a strong rule of law, you have a strong conceptualization of the individual and the rights of the individual through sort of constitutional and other arrangements. That's going to, obviously necessitate different adaptations, different developments than a system really driven for other ends. And if you go back and watch some of Kamala Harris's previous speeches on AI, she talks a lot about using AI to advance human rights and human dignity. Obviously that's a very liberal tradition kind of value. She speaks a lot about privacy being protected, equal access to opportunity, and I think really looks at it sort of holistically and saying, if AI is there to strengthen the rights of the individual and strengthen the underpinnings of democratic values systems and democratic polities, through strengthening those democracies, the world system will be made safer. Sort of, I think, hinting at or ascribing to this peaceful democracy kind of concept, that democracies are generally less likely to go to war, and especially less likely to go to war with one another. So I think she sees, sort of by advancing the public interest and by advancing the individual's liberty, and sort of through those two things colliding and strengthening democratic systems, this new technology vector will improve the global order and make the world a safer place. While at the same time, she obviously emphasizes, in particular, I think, kind of the medical R&D world, how can these technologies improve our research and development capabilities and kind of drive us forward. And really that's how I think she sees the main avenue for kind of winning the 21st century through AI. And like I said, it's easy to be cynical and skeptical and say, all countries are kind of the same and they're all, kind of out for their own interests, their own power projection. And I think in the international system, that's actually, there's some truth to that. But if you compare the U.S. policy as sort of embodied by Kamala Harris and her perspectives on this stuff to Chinese AI policy as embodied by the New Generation Artificial Intelligence Development Plan, you can see that their plan for where they want to go with this is really pretty devoid of those kinds of concepts that we would think of as being fairly mundane and sort of assumed. The AI development plan, you can go find it online, translations of it online, is really sort of your standard industrial policy driven. Develop X technology or become a leader in X technology by Y date, or achieve this much improvement in productive capacity, or this much improvement in profit, or this much improvement in some particular research output. These type of documents tend to follow a specific rubric that essentially lays out in this case whatever Xi Jinping's vision is about a particular topic, and usually has a 5 competencies or 3 competes, or there's you kind of litter through these documents, these kind of vague allusions to some kind of Politburo meeting where a particular policy was outlined in a short list, and they can be pretty tough to read for that reason, because you end up having to kind of know the code, the bureaucratic code of the Chinese Communist Party. Then there's essentially a series of operationalizations, right? We're going to make this happen through this kind of measurement, and we're going to show this through this kind of measurement, and this document really kind of cycles back and forth between these sort of kind of heavy-handed, big picture, what does Xi Jinping want to do concepts, and then also very specific. They mentioned swarm intelligence and manufacturing robots. They get very into the weeds, right, on particular avenues and types of AI development. But what you'll find in this document, in the Artificial Intelligence Development Plan, is there's almost no mention of individuals. There's a lot of mention of specific technologies, specific policies, specific goals. There's a lot of mention of the Chinese country, right? The idea of China and China being competitive in certain avenues or leading in certain avenues tends to dominate this framework. And there's, the sections they get closest to this really would be things like there's a section called Construct a Safe and Convenient Intelligent Society, and it kind of runs down smart cities, smart infrastructure, smart manufacturing, but really most of what it talks about is actually promoting national security and promoting the social credit system and really intermediating a lot of social interaction to promote social trust. So yeah, this document, the closest it really gets to talking about people is actually through society, which kind of makes sense when you think about the goals of Chinese development. The Chinese Communist Party writ large is obviously not an organization inheriting a lot of ideological background from liberalism, from human rights, conceptions of the individual. Things like that are pretty foreign or just pretty absent from their framework. So it's interesting that as far as AI and society is concerned, really they're talking about national security, and they're talking about intermediating as much of social interaction as possible. Immediately following that, there's a section on sort of strengthening civil to military kind of collaboration and cooperation on AI. This section is really devoted to much more on the military side, much more focused on how do we drive development to national security and military advancement. And then finally, near the end, there's a section about developing laws, regulations, and ethical norms that promote the development of AI. Interestingly, even in the title here, you can hear, right, that while these laws and regulations and norms are important, it's important for the development of AI. It's not important for the preservation of any kind of underlying conceptualization of the sort of sanctity or sovereignty or agency of the individual. And of course, this section is completely devoid of any kind of reference to individuals in that kind of strong sense, any kind of human rights conceptualization of the individual, really anything we would think about as like any kind of enlightenment or liberal articulation of how we think about individuals. And then there's like 3 sentences at the end that sort of says, hey, we're going to definitely listen to everybody, and gather feedback from the populace on AI for sure, definitely. So it's very much an afterthought, kind of tacked on. And really, why I think this is also interesting is when Kamala Harris gets up there and says that we want to win the competition for the 21st century. I think you picked this up from her speech, right? That there is a growing understanding, I think, in the Democratic Party that certainly, I think, as a country, right, that there is a potential threat here to, in some sense, our way of life. There is a competition on for this kind of key technology in the international system, and to some degree, the people that best utilize it will inherit a massive amount of political power in the near to medium term future. And just as it was interesting to see Harris's sort of more muscular foreign policy and defense policy, national security policy, I think she talked about making sure our military is the most lethal in the world, which was an interesting and forceful way to articulate that. Similar to that, I think she's sort of representing, leaning into and adopting a more muscular articulation of what we see as our core values in regards to new and emerging technologies like AI, where we really have a fundamental difference and a fundamental distinction here, and fundamentally something worth preserving and something that we see as worth fighting for. And that really is, her articulation is, I think, pretty clear that AI should be used to advance human rights and human dignity. Privacy is protected. We should see AI as a potential avenue to increase equity, diversity, inclusion, things like that. And ultimately, she's deeply concerned that we use this technology to strengthen democracy, which is, of course, based in some conceptualization of individual rights, kind of based on the traditions of classical liberalism. Yeah, and I, for one, actually found it quite heartening to hear her say this and sort of start to bring, obviously this was a one line in a speech, but it was a huge speech, right? And it kind of brings up this pretty niche issue on a national stage and starts to I think widen the conversation to bring more and more people in, make more and more people aware of the importance of this particular concept, of this particular avenue of competition between autocracy and democracy, and get more people thinking about how do we want to use this technology, and what parts of our society do we want to modify with it? Do we want to improve with it? And what parts of our society, in particular, our fundamental rights as individuals in a democracy, in an open society, in a plural, political community? How do we want to see this technology interacting with that? And what parts of that do we want to protect and kind of wall off through regulatory action? So as always, really appreciate you guys watching. Really appreciate your comments, as I mentioned before, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks again.